In this lesson, I want to create a fat footer. So we've got our 3 sections down here within the footer, and I want to really break these out and update them so that they're actually come in as 3 sections. So we've got the first section, second section, and third section. So the first thing that we should do is we need to be able to identify them. Now we could give them IDs, but another way to do that is to use it within classes, and with CSS we do have the ability to select them as the first one and the last one, and because we want 3, that's going to be perfect because we can identify the first child and we can identify the last one as well. So let's take a look at that and do footer, and this is going to be section. And so we're not applying it to all sections, we're only applying it to the first. And I'm just going to show you how this is going to work. So maybe we'll do a background color and we'll make it nice and colorful so it really stands out. And this is where we need to be more specific because we need to do first child. So let's see how that turns out. So we see that the first child is red, and we can identify the last child, and we'll make that last child blue. So we've got first child, we've got last child, and we can just set a default for this section 1, or we can do an nth child. So let's just select it with the nth child. So these are just different ways that we can make our selections. And this is going to be nth child, and we want to do it as the second one. And let's do a background color within here, because we know that we're actually going to be using 3 different sections. So when we refresh it, we do have all of our 3 sections there all ready to go. So now all we need to do is update the floating of all of these children and set different widths for them. So the first one, we're going to float over to the left. So just like we did the 2 content container areas at the top, we can float them over to the left, and I can give it a width of 30%. And then now, let's see how this is going to look now. So now we've got this one floating over to the left, but we still don't have all the other ones set properly. So I am going to set them all with default widths. And we see that by default they're all floating to the left now. So we don't want that. We want to float one over to the right. So depending on which one we want to select, we're going to float it over to the right. So now we've floated the contact over to the right. Maybe I want to add in, so we floated these 2 are over to the left because this one doesn't have properties yet, so it's automatically just floating. We can set this one as a margin, so maybe we don't even need to float it. We can set it to margin auto, because remember before we talked about how margin auto works is that it actually centers that content. So we didn't actually have to float it either way. If we margin it auto, then we get that right sizing capability. And maybe we want to set a default height as well. So height, maybe 200 pixels. So we want to have a really nice fat footer there. And it's maybe a better way, because I find I'm repeating a lot of this stuff here within these sections. So I can get rid of that and clean it up a little bit by removing out the width and only keeping it in there. And maybe we can do a height of 100% and see how that turns out. So that now each one of these sections is actually taking up that full available width, and maybe add in some padding. So this will add in a little bit of padding there for the wording. So see, we're still not overlapping, which is good, but of course when we're resizing, we're going to get some kind of crunching there. And this is something that we're going to take care of in the upcoming lesson. So also maybe we don't want to do a height or max height, or we could set it as needed. So this is not something that again, depending on how much content you're placing in here, you might have a bunch of links, you might have a whole bunch of content in one, so you might want to adjust those different than the 30%. But essentially this is what our current website looks like, and so we've got it designed. Everything looks pretty much like what we had originally set out to do, and now the finalized part of it is just to make an update when it resizes on mobile. Because right now it's not really ideal. We can resize it and some of it's working, some of it's not, some of it's kind of going unpredictable, and the big thing is where these floats are happening. So we definitely need to take care of those and to update those as we're resizing. So let's do that in the upcoming lesson.